So thank you so much. I am honored, Evie, to be here today and to work with you on this. It's just been so exciting. And so far, I've been very, very pleased and excited about all of the presentations we've seen. And thank you, Paul, for being part of this as well. I just want to say that it is really exciting to be on this webinar today and to use that for our workshop. So I just want to point out that my conversation here will be in two parts. I will talk for about 15 minutes, my usual scholarly piece of me, to go back and really look at what Stanislavski actually said about film. I found it very enlightening when I went back to the record and looked at that. And then I'm going to be joined by the three actors you see on screen right now. So we're going to do a little workshop on a tiny, tiny little piece, maybe for those of you working with active analysis or working in this field. It may not be particularly profound, but I'm very happy to share it and our work together. I'll introduce the three actors right now before I go to my remarks. Joelle Ray Arp-Dunham is a director, actor, a consent and sexual intimacy professional, as well as a scholar and educator in both theater and film. She's currently a teaching assistant professor at Kansas State University, serves on the editorial boards of the Journal of Consent-Based Performance and Stanislavski Studies, and she often uses cognitive science as a lens to understand the acting process. So it's great to have you here. She's also the editor of the recently released collection of Stanislavski and Intimacy. Thank you for being here, Joelle. Grigor is an LA-based actor who began with improvisation as a member of Impro Theater, which he still works with. He gets a lot of mainly live theater gigs in LA. And Keith Day is dedicated actor based in the Philadelphia region. He's also a professional pilot, so he actually does in fact fly in to my in-person studios on Monday nights to be with us as we study active analysis. That's dedication. So I want to say that both Keith and Grigor are characters in my book. If you've read the recent dynamic acting through active analysis book, they kindly allowed me to fictionalize them. So parts of what you read about them in my book is true and parts of it is me. So they were I was very happy to include them. And Joelle and I have been working with each other both online and since the S word in UCR, University of California of Riverside, where I first met her on another kind of experimentation with active analysis, where we were investigating the difference between how is an etude different from an improvisation, which Grigor, you've already been working with and us. So I'm going to bring you back a little bit later to tell everybody how you were prepared. And now I'm going to go on to my actual prepared remarks, okay? So you can see me, right? And you can unspotlight yourselves, and I'm going to begin. Let's start with a fun anecdote. From 1922 to 1924, when the Moscow Art Theater was touring through the United States, the Russian actors regularly went to the movies. Cinema houses opened at 9 a.m. and continued to screen films after the live theaters closed and cost only 10 cents, making it easy and affordable for the actors to attend before and after their performances. Moreover, because the American films at that time were silent, they spoke clearly to the non-English speakers. Maria Uspianskaya, who was later one of Strasberg's direct teachers, held the company record, seeing 4 films a day, 3 before and 1 after each performance. In contrast to his fellow actors, Stanislavski seemed a lot less curious. He wrote and said very little about the developing art of cinema, despite the fact that during his lifetime, its technology was invented, it became a new means for creating visual and narrative works of art, and with the addition of synchronous sound, it increasingly challenged live theater. Stanislavski's silence has it's early here. Stanislavski's silence has generally been interpreted as a rigid rejection of cinematic art. The very fact that he refused to speak for months at a time to actors in his circle who had appeared in films contributed to this negative interpretation. As I prepared to meet with you today, I wanted to verify Stanislavski's negative views on cinema, especially because I also sensed that his reticence, at least in part, may have reflected a refusal to debate about an art form that he knew little about. As I dug into the record, I began to uncover a few statements on cinema that show a much more nuanced attitude than I had anticipated. Now, the nuances in Stanislavski's thinking become clearest when they're set into an historical context. So I'm going to start by saying that during the 1910s, Russia's Tsar, Nikolai II, was one of cinema's fiercest enemies, baldly calling the new art an empty and dangerous influence of no need to anyone. Following their czar's lead, the imperial theaters contractually banned all their actors from appearing in films, and other established theaters followed suit. In contrast, the Moscow Art Theater's more liberal contract included, quote, a conscience clause, unquote, that only barred actors from taking part in films that does not have serious motives, leaving the individual actors to decide for themselves whether a given cinematic project was artistically worthy. As a consequence, many of the company's actors and staff took advantage of this clause to work in films, hence Stanislavski's silent treatment of them. In 1913 and 1914, Maria Andreeva lobbied the Moscow Art Theater to create a cinematic studio under its umbrella. As you may know, Andreeva had been an actor in Stanislavski's amateur company when he and Nemirovich Danchenko accepted her as a founding member of the Moscow Art Theater. She was a devoted follower of Stanislavski's and passionate about her acting, but she was also unique among the company's ensemble. First, as the wife of a highly ranked government official, she was a member of Russia's high society. And by choosing to work as a professional actor, she broke society's rules. Stanislavski bent them by using a pseudonym, which is Stanislavski. His real name was Alexeyev. But she actually broke them and used her name. Second, she broke the rules again when she left her husband for the playwright Maxim Gorky, becoming his common-law wife. And third, she joined Gorky as an ardent revolutionary, turning against the government that had employed her first husband. And of course, Tsar Nikolai's sense of the theater, the cinema, as being not interesting. She began to carry a gun with her at all times to rehearsals. to disappear mysteriously from the theater for Bolshevik meetings, and she willingly took part in terrorist plots. Her activism even won Lenin's praise. And after the failed attempt at a revolution in 1905, she and Gorky fled the country, severing her connection with the Moscow Art Theater. Over time, Stanislavski's admiration for Andreeva's beauty and talent turned into a bitter disappointment with her disregard for the company's theatrical ethics. So in 1913, when Andreeva had left Gorky, returned to Russia, and was asking to return to her position at the Moscow Art Theater, she may have introduced the idea for a cinema studio as a strategic move to increase her value to the company. Nonetheless, her passion for cinema was unquestionably sincere. She had become enamored with the new art through the work of her son by her first marriage, who had become an early Russian filmmaker of note. Moreover, given the Tsar's feelings about cinema, Russia's revolutionaries embraced cinema's ability to reach mass audiences. As she wrote, cinematography is an extremely democratic art form. When Stanislavski invited her in 1913 to join not the theater's main company, but his newly formed first studio, she was offended and she refused. So too did her proposal for a cinema studio go unrealized, perhaps as much due to the tensions that had developed between the two as to their differing opinions on cinema. But why is Andreeva so important here? It seems to me that Andreeva's lobbying on behalf of cinema significantly broke Stanislavski's silence on the topic, because most of what he wrote were in those very years, 1913 to 1914. So now I'm going to turn to his actual writings about cinema. In private notes from 1913, he identified what he considered to be the main difference between film and theater. He writes, in terms of externals such as technical crafts, cinematography triumphs over theater. In terms of its sets, naturalistic detail, and I would even say stylizations, lighting, the depiction of crowds and processions, of everyday life, of storms and winds, cinematography is incomparable. And in a few years, I predict cinematography will also have sound. On this side of things, it has outpaced theater. But he felt that technology was incapable of conveying the ineffable inner workings of the human mind and spirit. On the other side, the internal side of art, he writes, the life of the human spirit in experiencing and acting will always remain primitive in the cinema. And this is one of the things that Tamar was taking on earlier today when he was talking about radiation. In 1914, in an interview with the Petersburg Courier, Stanislavski treated this difference as one that was ontological. He said, quote, theater and cinema occupy different realms. The way that theater excites, charms, and draws us in can never be reproduced in the cinema, which excels in its visual and external forms. But theater lives on the exchange of spiritual energy that continuously occurs between spectators and actors. That empathic but invisible connection that unites actors and audiences can never occur in cinematography because the live actor is absent, thus limiting any spiritual exchange to mechanical means. In theater, a living person makes us feel joy or sorrow, alarms or quiets us. But in the cinema, everything can only appear to be living.
Right.
Now, I find this particularly interesting. It is unsurprising to me that acting, which Stanislavski considered to be a psychophysical art that simultaneously taps the eternal body and the internal spirits of actors, um, would allow Stanislavski to put theater as the superior of the two arts, that they are two different realms. But what surprises me here is that Stanislavski's definition of cinematic language as dependent upon the possibilities inherent in its technologies anticipates a long-lived academic perspective that views screen performance as created in the editing room from the natural behavior of actors previously captured by cameras during filming. And this point of view seriously dismisses actors and what they bring to films. So I want to talk about this view just a little bit before we go into working with some actors. It started, I suppose, in 1936 when the cultural critic Walter Benjamin went as far as comparing screen actors to props and set pieces like tables and chairs. A screen actor, writes Benjamin, does not portray himself as the character in his role, but instead represents himself to the public before the camera. And among cinema studies, this perspective on screen performance dominated the film of cinema and media studies until James Narramore published his groundbreaking study, Acting in the Cinema, in 1988, in which he demonstrates through careful observation that actors in Hollywood films actually do display acting skills. I and my colleague Cynthia Barron, who I believe is here today, stepped into this fray in 2008 with our book, Reframing Screen Performance, arguing that actors do in fact contribute to films by collaborating with camera, lighting, sound, setting, and the like. Thus, while we acknowledge the importance of technology in editing and the making of narrative films, we also give performance elements their due, a quote from our book. From this reframed point of view, that screen performance is actually a collaboration of the human with the technology. Stanislavski's specific criticisms of film become more about the ways that films of his day presented actors and narratives. In the first case, he criticized silent film actors for resorting to cliches by relying upon the conventions of an older form of acting that he called theater of representation. This is what he wrote in 1913. On screen, everything, every cliche is visible and recorded. So if you want to see the difference between representation and experiencing, which is his term for his preferred work in theater, he writes again, if you want to see the difference between representation and experiencing, just go to the cinema. In the second case, he rejected the stereotypical narratives upon which most silent films relied. He and the Moscow Art Theater entered into negotiations with a leading American studio for a filmed version of their 1898 production of Tsar Fyodor. And when the studio demanded adjustments to the play that would pit an unadulterated hero against an unremitting villain, with the hero finally triumphing, the negotiations broke down. As the Russians explained, the play represents actual history with complicated personalities and cannot ethically accommodate a happy ending. So, as I transition into our work with my three actors today, despite these criticisms, Stanislavski ended his 1914 interview with the Petersburg Courier with a very interesting note. Before fearing or crying about the death of culture due to the rise of cinematography, one should study its laws and only then praise or condemn it. Cinematography cannot replace the theater, but perhaps if one studies it and then takes it upon oneself to introduce a spiritual component, then this would be an unquestionably important and beautiful development. These words suggest to me that studying cinema might shed light upon how the bridge that Andreevna had envisioned might be built. And from my vantage point today, I see the bridge between theater and cinema as that provided by the actor as we reframe screen performance as a collaboration with camera. So, take a breath. I'm going to set up our wonderful work with our actors by saying just a few more things. So if you have questions about the historical part of my presentation today, hold on to them. Because I want to go to the actors to be as efficient with our time as we can. But I need to say a few more things about this bridge. I think that two things have to happen in film performance if the actors can bridge theater and cinema. And these two things must occur simultaneously. First, something external must be visible. This is where Stanislavski recognized that cinema excels in the external. But given the laws of cinema, to borrow Stanislavski's word, actors will rarely, if ever, be able to shape how their work is framed and lit on set and later edited. And at least one of the actors in our Greek presentation spoke to that today about what he could not control. So the actor's creative agency lies entirely within the shot, making it necessary for actors to consistently and continuously adjust their means of expression to what the camera sees. As the Hollywood coach Josephine Dillon Gable put it, the lenses of the camera and the lenses of the human eye see only the body, not the thought, nor the wish, nor the emotion, nor the soul, just the body. So we will use our internet platform today to simulate a medium close-up by spotlighting each actor in turn for the audience. Now, the second thing that has to happen is that the actor needs to convey traces of their character's inner life within that camera frame. And this is where theater traditionally excels and how viewers of film can hopefully connect with the, quote, human spirit of the role, to use Stanislavski's phrase, even when the actor is absent. And as one of our first presentation today suggests, it's through the eyes. But another law of cinema is the camera's ability to change the perceived distance between actor and the eventual viewer. We tend to forget that cameras can go further away from actors than can a theater audience, as well as coming close in. And generally, when we have long shots, it allows the actor to work with their full bodies much as they do on a stage. It's the close-ups that challenge the actor to adjust their means of expression to subtler movements in the face, head, and shoulders, which is why I think most contemporary actor training meets this challenge by assuming that when, quote, actors give their characters active minds, Our eyes move naturally from thought to thought, producing the subtle movements that the camera needs. And here I'm quoting a colleague of mine, Joseph Hacker, who wrote this in his book about active minds. I like that phrase. It's Joe's. So in our workshop today, I want to experiment with the link between the external and the internal by using one of the most familiar aspects of active analysis, that of playable verbs. And I think it was Michaela who raised this in her work with her preparation of her directors, the sense that verbs can support what the actors are doing. Now, these are the questions before us in our experiment today with our actors. Can two different verbs prompt two different sets of inner thoughts? And are these differences then visible in the actor's movements within the frame? And do these different verbs convey then a different inner life? So we're looking at, can these two things happen simultaneously? The actors and I met for one rehearsal before, so we would get our act together, so to speak. But a lot of what's going to happen today is in the moment. But I would like each of the actors to just say a couple of, I've been speaking a lot, so I'm going to ask each actor to just say how we prepared. And I'm going to ask Grigor first. Actually, I put Grigor first because he's going to talk about the facts. Grigor, talk a little bit about reading for the facts in the text that we did. Just a couple of sentences. Then, Joelle, I will go to you and ask you to speak to how the facts support a choice of an action or a counteraction, what those are. And then Keith, how you get to the choice of the playable verbs. So just hear from the actors' voices before we start the work. Grigor, you're up.
Sure. Hi, guys. So with the scripts we looked at, we took a very short passage. And by reading through it first, just for the facts, we can identify certain things. For example, in Read to Me, we'll see that the character Hank interrupts Grace a number of times throughout the piece. This is sort of indicative of what sort of role he's filling in this piece. For example, he's going to be a counteraction. We'll see that more as we go on.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for mentioning Read to Me. That'll be the second excerpt that we do, and I will introduce what's going on there. Joelle, you want to give us, you're also working with Read to Me, but talk to them a little bit about action counteraction, because that's always the first question I ask. Are you in action or are you counteraction? This is the piece of the active analysis that is to the heart of it. Go yes. For it, Joelle.
Absolutely. So the action is the driving force for the entire scene, play, or whatever section you're working on. And so it's as if the force is going this way all the way through, and then you have a counteraction. Occasionally the counteraction comes right at it, but more often than not, the counteraction is just a different force that kind of knocks it off kilter a little bit. And so that's the counteraction. And you put those together, and that's what creates the drama of the piece. But you have to keep coming back to what is the action, what is the main driving force of the piece in order to keep it going. And for us as actors, it also helps us as we're trying to choose verbs on the types of verbs we might choose. It affects those as well.
Right. And you know you're the action or the counteraction, I would add, based on reading for the facts, because it becomes very clear who drives the scene in terms of the action. Sometimes it's a little less clear to pick the counteraction, but I think the pieces that we picked are pretty clear. Keith, you want to talk? Keith has worked with me in my studio for a long time. It took him a while to get to playable verbs, so I challenge you with this. So just talk to us a little bit about what you think about when you pick a verb.
Sure. Thank you, Sharon. I think, like probably some people when they start out in acting, or even some people that carry it through, a lot of people will look at a text and embrace an action, and they use that action as a catalyst to propel them through a scene, and they'll hang on to it until it just withers out. When I came on with Sharon, she basically had to just kind of kneel on me and slap me in the face over about 10 or 15 years until I finally got it. Said, you got to play a verb. The action's only going to carry you so long. So that's what the nice thing about a verb is. It stays with you throughout the scene. And like Joelle says, until you have another counteraction, sometimes you have a scene with maybe a couple verbs, but at least you're staying true to what is actually propelling you through the scene with the verb. So.
Excellent, thank you. And the reason it stays with you as a verb is you're supporting either the action or the counteraction, Keith. And a verb allows you to try out and try to do the verb in various ways. So sometimes if we think in terms of tactics or changing beats or something like that, those don't apply so much with active analysis. We find those by trying to work with the verb. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first excerpt, and then you can stay on while I do that. And then when we start working, we can spotlight the actor that we're looking at. So our first text is a very brief exchange from Murray Schiskell's play Love, L-U-V, from 1968. And it involves Harry, whose life after college has not gone well, and he's about to throw himself off a bridge in despair when his old friend Milt intervenes to save him. Keith plays Harry and Grigor plays Milt. And we're going to start with Keith on Spotlight. So Keith, can you come back on? Grigor will be a voiceover. So this is and by the way, Joelle and Grigor, can you unspotlight yourself so we can see just Keith? Thank you. All right, so Keith, first, are you the action or the counter action?
In this one, I would say the counter action. In some respects.
Yes, and the facts tell you that because the persuasion of Milt, as people will hear in the text, is really driving your work. So your verb has to be in light of the counteraction. So can you tell me, we're going to do 2 takes of you back to back with 2 different verbs. Can you tell us all what verb you're thinking of trying first and then which verb you're trying second?
First one is to inquire, and the second one is to reject.
Okay, so we need the object there. So you're inquiring of what it is that Grigor is telling you as Milt. Is that correct? So you really are trying to interrogate his lines, okay? And in the second one, you're rejecting them outright. So there's a resistance toward even listening. Okay, good. So we're going to start. Grigor, we make sure you're unmiked, and let's see these 2 verbs back to back and see what happens. So it's all up to you, and I'm going to mute.
Look at you. At your age, worn out, defeated, wrecked in body and soul. Takes guts to go on living, Harry. Takes guts to make something of your life. Harry, listen to me. Love. Yes, Harry, love. Human love. The love of a small boy for his toy wooden horse. The love of an old classmate. The love of a man for a woman. Doesn't that mean anything to you?
Love? What do you think has been keeping me going this time?
Well?
Look, Milt, I don't know if I can love.
That's what everyone says until they meet the right person. And then,
What?
you don't know?
Milt, how could I?
So mean.
No, not once.
Oh, Harry. Harry. To have lived and not loved. Do you call that living?
Take a breath, Keith, and move into your second verb, okay?
Look at you. At your age, worn out, defeated, wrecked in body and soul. Takes guts to go on living, Harry. Takes guts to make something of your life. Harry, listen to me. Love.
Love.
Yes, Harry, love. Human love. The love of a small boy for his toy wooden horse. The love of an old classmate. The love of a man for a woman. Doesn't that mean anything to you?
What do you think has been keeping me going all this time?
Well,
I don't know if I can, Milt.
that's what everyone says until they meet the right person. And then,
What?
oh, you don't know?
How could I?
No, you don't mean.
Not once.
Oh, Harry, Harry, to have lived and not loved. Do you call that living?
All right. Okay. Can all my actors come back for a moment? Spotlight yourselves, Grigor and Joelle. Did I exit the spotlight? So I was probably didn't exit myself. So I'm going to exit myself now and just so I won't do that mistake again because I'm cued with what I'm seeing, and that's not quite the same what everybody's seeing on Teams. So forgive that. But Keith, thank you for that. Grigor, Joelle, did he accomplish what we think? Did the verbs make some external differences there? Just handling this for everybody the way I would if it were rehearsal, right? Joelle, you want to say something? Grigor?
Certainly, it was coming towards and coming away was a lot of that, and where the focus was more internal versus external for different ones.
Yes, and I actually saw a change in pattern in your eyes as well, Keith, because in the first one, I felt like you were either looking down or out toward the speaker, whereas in the second one, I found your eyes going up more and out and away from the speaker. So those are things we could perfect if we were working on another take, right? Grigor, I'm going to ask you to highlight yourself now, and I am out of the highlight for the rest of the workshop at least, so I don't make the same mistake. We're going to see exactly the same text now with the action on screen. So Joelle and Keith, take yourself off of Spotlight. Oh, and Grigor, tell us before you begin, what is the verb you are going after?
On this take, I'll be playing with to pawn.
Okay.
To pawn the love onto.
Right. And because you're the action and the action has more text, we're only going to do one take of you with your favorite verb, and you like this verb to pawn. So let's see how that translates into what it is that Grigor understands physically by that verb. So let's go for it. Keith, be sure you're on mics where your mic is on so we can hear you.
Look at you. At your age, worn out, defeated, wrecked in body and soul. It takes guts to go on living, Harry. It takes guts to make something of your life. Listen to me. Love.
Love?
Yes, Harry, love. The love of a small boy for his toy wooden horse. The love of an old classmate. The love of a man for a woman. Doesn't that mean anything to you?
What do you think's been keeping me going this long?
Well,
I I, I don't know if I can love Milt.
that's what everyone says until they meet the right person. And then,
Wait, what?
you know.
Ah, how could I?
You don't mean.
Milt, not once.
Oh, Henry, Harry, to have lived and not loved. Do you call that living?
Thank you. Thank you, Grigor. And there was much, if, well, we can all come back. Joelle and Keith, come back and just share what you saw before we go to our next excerpt. So, Keith, how is it different watching him rather than being watched?
Because I just obviously through your senses, when you're hearing somebody, you're depending on one sense. When you have the visual cues, I can see his mannerisms. He's talking through his eyes, he's talking through his body and his language, body language. As a friend to try to get me to come on over to embrace the love concept, and it actually sells better when you see it than just hearing it.
Beautiful. Joelle, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think that it felt so listened to. Last time with the focus on Keith, I was seeing the struggle and kind of the pushing away all the time and trying to figure that out. With Grigor, it was kind of always going in a similar direction, forward, just trying slowly but very, very slowly to reel him in, and it was lovely to see.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. Let's go to the second extract, and that means that you are spotlighted only, Joelle, and I'll come back for a spotlight just to introduce the excerpt. Our second excerpt is Read to Me. It was written by Rebecca Gorman O'Neill in 2016, and it's about Grace, who comes into a children's bookshop wanting an impromptu story time. And Grace is played by Joelle, and Grigor is playing the shop's employee who's really wanting to get out of here and not to have a performance of story time where he has to read to somebody, especially an adult. So that is the circumstances. I will spotlight myself. Joelle is on camera, Grigor is off. Joelle, what do you see yourself in this scene, as the action or the counteraction?
The action, definitely causing it to happen.
Right. So your verb that you choose has to be something that pushes the whole scene forward, rather than putting yourself into the reactive position as Keith did when we watched him. Okay, next, I want to do 2 takes of you as well so we can see the 2 different verbs. So you tell me, which verb do you want to try in our first take and which in the second?
I'll try the first one to spool him in, and the second one to press him with a boulder.
Right. And if you guys notice, I'm not really trying to censor or push the actors in any one particular direction for their choice of verbs. As I always say in my own teaching, the verbs are theirs. The facts are given as in the text, but when they choose a verb, it has to mean something to the actor. It has to be tasty for the actor. And as long as it doesn't, violate the text, any verb, however creative and whatever it means to them. For example, to pawn would not have been a choice that I might have made as an actor, but it worked very, very well for Grigor. And for you, spooling in is your language, which we want to see. So to spool in, we're going to see, and then to press. Okay, so you will just take a breath between the two takes and keep going. Grigor, we're listening.
Great. And I can't tell that I'm spotlighted, so am I on yours? Because my end it's not. Okay.
It's a little disconcerting, but yes, you are spotlighted. I can see that.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Do you work here?
Yes, I work here.
I want story time. I want someone to sit there and I'll sit here and I'll listen and you read me a story.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm afraid you're a little confused.
I don't see what the problem is.
Is there someone I can call?
For heaven's sake, I don't have dementia. I just want a story. Is that too much to ask?
We read the stories to the little ones who can't read yet. That's the whole thing. You can read, I'm guessing, and you're welcome to pick up
That's the problem.
What's the problem?
I can read. I can read and read and read, and this is what I get. I'm over 40. I'm a good, educated woman, and I can read the good books, the smart people books. House of Leaves, Confederacy of Dunces, Gravity's Rainbow. Have you ever?
Couldn't get through it.
I know. So I gave up and I decided, hey, let's read for fun, right? Some guilty pleasures. This one is about a woman who gets sucked back in time to have sex with a steamy Scottish guy. This one's about a woman who gets sucked back in time to have sex with a steamy vampire. But then again, she's a witch, so, And this one is set in New Orleans. And it
Sorry.
has vampires.
I get that you're frustrated, but what is it that you're looking for?
Anything you can read that will help me navigate my life. I'm not a witch or a vampire or a whatever.
All right.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Take a breath and start again with your second verb. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Do you work here?
Yes, I work here.
I want story time. I want someone to sit there and I'll sit here and listen and you tell me a story.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid you're a little confused.
I don't see what the problem is.
Is there someone I can call?
Oh, for heaven's sake, I don't have dementia. I just want a story. Is that too much to ask?
We read the stories to the little ones who can't read yet. That's the whole thing. You can read, I'm guessing, and you're welcome to pick up a
That's the
book.
problem.
What's the problem?
I can read. I can read and read, and this is what I get. I'm over 40, I'm a good educated woman, and I can read the good books, the smart people books. House of Leaves, Confederacy of Dunces, Gravity's Rainbow. Have you ever?
I couldn't get through it.
I know. So I gave that up and decided, hey, let's read for fun, right? Some guilty pleasures. This one's about a woman who gets sucked back in time to have sex with some Scottish guy. This one's about a woman who gets sucked back in time to have steamy sex with a vampire. She's a witch, so there's that. And this one takes place in New Orleans, about vampires and werewolves.
I'm sorry. I get that you're frustrated, but what are you looking for?
Anything that can help me navigate my life. I'm not a witch or a vampire or anything.
All right.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, let's have the three actors come on for a quick moment to take a look at what happened. And Grigor, as somebody watching, what did you notice about the two? You can come and highlight.
Sure. So for
And
me,
come on
the
as
second
well.
one, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the second one, I definitely feel way more push from Joelle. So it puts me as the other actor a little more on my hind foot there. Like
Mhm.
I feel a little more like, okay, let's, how can we get through this? Yeah, the first one, she almost feels a lot nicer. So like I feel like I can more comfortably push her away, you know?
Okay, so in terms of the partnership, you have very different reactions to the verbs, which as the counteraction, that's what you have to be open to. So that's great. Keith, do you want to say anything about the
Of
two?
course. The first Joelle's first verb, you almost like feel sorry for her. She's very vulnerable. You know, you want to help her out. Her second verb, she was pretty charged up. I felt like throwing her right the hell out of the damn store. She was a pain in the ass. So I was like, all right, now you just get to the
Okay.
get the hell out of here.
Okay. Well, what I noticed for me, Joelle, is that the second one seemed to open the door for you to find more physical adjustments within the frame. I saw more happening and I became and I remained more interested consequently because you kept doing things that were a surprise to me as I watched, whereas the first one was more even keeled all the way through. So let's do this. And this will be our last iteration of our workshop before we go to calling it a day and asking for questions and comments. So just so the viewers know where we are in this, we're going to do it one more time with Grigor on screen, listening to you. And Joelle, for this one, keep press as the verb that seemed to be the most productive for you. So we'll put Grigor counteraction on the screen and we'll do the scene one more time.
I'm sorry. Do you work here?
I work here.
I want story time. I want someone to sit there, and I'll sit here, and I'll listen, and you read me a story.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think you're a little bit confused.
I don't see what the problem is.
Is there someone I can call or?
For heaven's sake, I don't have dementia. I just want a story. Is that so much to ask?
We read for the really little ones who can't read yet. That's the whole thing. I'm assuming you can read. You're welcome to pick up a book.
That's the problem.
What's the problem?
I can read. I can read and read, and this is what I get. I'm over 40. I'm a good, educated woman, and I can read the good books. The smart people books. House of Leaves, Confederacy of Dunces, Gravity's Rainbow. Have you ever?
Yeah, I can't get through it.
I know. So I gave that up and decided, hey, let's read for fun, right? Some guilty pleasures. This one's about a woman who gets sucked back in time to have steamy sex with a Scottish guy. this one's about a woman who gets sucked back in time to have steamy sex with a vampire. She's a witch in the first place, so I guess. And this one's set in Louisiana, and there's vampires and werewolves.
I'm sorry. I get that you're frustrated, but what do you want?
Anything you can read that will help me navigate my life. I'm not a witch or a vampire or a whatever.
All right.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Grigor. I'm going to come back on to the spotlight as well. And thank you. And Joelle, can I ask you what you saw in Grigor's performance? And Keith, you can also add to that if you'd like by flipping it and seeing the counteraction within the screen this time. So we'll end with those two remarks and then open it to everybody.
Sure. Yeah, it was really fun because that's actually the first. Well, I think that I don't remember doing that too often that particular way. I'm not sure we've done that one before. But it was fun because he exasperated me more seeing him. And so I felt like it was harder for me to keep control. And it was really fun to play off of. I heard my voice just doing weird things all of a sudden, and I loved it. It was fun. It was really fun.
Sharon, just like when you talk and we do some scene studies and working in different concepts, like when you talk about building alliances, I absolutely felt very sorry for Grigor and wanted to help the poor guy. I was like,
so you identified with him.
Oh, I identified with him, but it's like you could see it in his body language. He's like, I just work here, It's like,
well, what I noticed, Grigor, in particular, is the moment you stopped and really looked at her, and just something as the teacher, director, wherever you want to call me here, the workshop leader, I noticed something for the first time that I had not seen in the scene before by your reaction to her talking about the specifics of the books that were frustrating her, is the gender difference here. Because when we put you on screen, Grigor, and we see a male eye looking at a female who's talking about all these ridiculous sexual experiences, and that's the moment you stopped and looked at her, we have this other kind of subtext coming in that we might not have had otherwise. So thank you all. This is the end of my presentation and workshop. I have a virtual hand for all the actors. Thank you so much for joining us. And Evie, you want to moderate whatever time we have for questions and comments. I'm so happy to hear. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sharon, Joelle, Keith, and Grigor for your work. That was fantastic. I mean, to me, one quick reflection, because it's all about the medium. And there's something about the teacher coming closer to the detail that is expected in this on screen. The fact that you use the CAU here, of course, when we are teaching in a classroom, we're using live feed, so we still have a screen there and we watch the close-up. But there is something about us being aware of our whole body being there in presence and of everyone else being there in presence that takes some of that focus on the actor. So thanks for the opportunity to observe that today in somebody else's classroom. Fantastic question. We have already.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yes. Hi, Sharon. As always, everything you present is innovative and very, very clear and informative. So thank you very much. I have a question concerning your choice of action in making the action dynamic. How do you tie in the search for the super task and the choice of the actor's action when an action which an actor might choose personally? What do you use to determine that action also is moving towards the super task of the play and the character?
It's a complicated question, Phil, especially complicated for film, because
Yeah.
most actors will not have access to the full text of a film. And especially if you're a day player, you might only have what we saw. And when you audition, you only have the text of the sides that they're going to ask you for. So I don't really deal with it when I'm dealing with screen work like this. And I also deal with it in a production only after everybody in a cast has bought into what they think the overall meaning of the play is for the production that we're choosing. So if I were directing, it would be really important for me to have, because I use active analysis, for all the actors to come to the table with the ideas of what it is we want to say to our audiences. So it's a complicated question to answer quickly, because the word in Russian is used in 3 different contexts.
Right.
A super task can be for one actor in his role. And in that case, if we're doing a day player with one scene, that's the only thing they have access to, and it's whatever they want. If it's used in terms of the director, we're talking about the super task of what the whole production or the film might want to communicate as the wider lens of why we're doing this film, why we're doing this text, how it speaks to our audiences today. And that's something in a theater, especially, we want to tie all of the actors into. And then there's the third way of looking at it, which is from the actor's point of view, who has a single role with a character arc. And then it seems to me really important that the super task is linked to whatever arc the play develops for that character. So I don't use the word super task myself unless I'm very, very clear on which of these meanings I'm using. Is it the director's concept? Is it the actor's, the character's full arc? Is it only a scene in which one character has only access and doesn't even know how they fit into the whole, and the editing is going to take care of that? That's where the agency of the actor is much more limited in film acting, and we have to really help them see the weeds consequently. So I don't know if that's a really good answer, but it shows the complication of the term too.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, that clarifies. Like, my work is almost exclusively in theater, but I do have students who audition for Hollywood and for television shows, and I'm always feeling like, not knowing what the whole script is about, I'm not sure if my coaching is actually helping them fit in with what the director will want. But what your answer really clarifies that, and especially in working with film, and that's why I'm sitting here today, to learn a little bit more about how you do that. So
Philip,
thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Philip, this is a fantastic question, because in the way that we train actors, we very often think as directors, and we're used to script analysis when we train people for the stage. The difference from the screen is exactly that. And of course, when they work with the director can take anything where they want and talk about the full work. But when training the actors, what I found useful working with my students is we've made this deal that when we give feedback to students, or when they watch back the work on camera, we never talk, oh yes, but this is what the script meant, this is what the character did, this is what their backstory. We always go for what works now, truthfully, in this moment for this actor. Because all we want is for this actor to stand out among all the self-tapes or the casting tapes that a director is going to get. And it will be not serving our work if we go for that. We just want the actor to do their best acting. And you know what? If their best acting is not the interpretation that the director wants, then they're not the right person. they have to find a work where their best acting, their best kind of choices because of the people that they are. And I think the Greek actors really well articulated that no matter what this box is, when I swallow it, it comes out as me. So it's my version of who I am on camera, and it needs to be truthful. Yeah. So it's about shifting the focus from the scripts to the people, to the person in front of us.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great. So I think, Richard, you have a great question, actually, and I read it on the chat as well, but go ahead, please. Speak it loud.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Yes, it's basically coming down to what you had just said, Sharon, regarding that interplay between the actor and even the editor in regards. It's a huge team when it comes to film. It's not just the one person being able to convey their craft and their character. And I really like what you had just said a moment ago about it being in the now. So my question comes into play that I get the feeling that for those with Stanislavskian foundations when it comes to acting may benefit from looking at being in film as being one of two, adding an additional layer on top of being in that now as the character. And it's recognizing that they are a memory, because a camera immediately makes a cut in time and space. That's the whole idea of a camera. It takes a moment there and it removes to a very, very far away place for the audience, a world away to be able to watch it. Whereas at stage, we're an audience and we're there being able to experience at that moment. And in addition to that, each and every cut that is made on film is the removal of time and space. That's how we get from one person getting out of a car to walking into a door. And so it seems that there would be a benefit for the actor to remember that they are also performing in the now, but they are also a memory, that they are being something that is going to be rewatched and rewatched and rewatched as we would a home video or a picture of a loved one or something that will bring back that experiential feeling. So we're not just a representation as Stanislavski had felt about film back in the 30s, but we can be an experiential representation that is something new and different and doesn't have to be denigrated, because it is the thing that we push a new emotion into, that nostalgic effect. And I'm wondering if that would be something that might be considered for actors that are now going into film, that is different than the spontaneity of realism on stage.
It's a great metaphor to see it as a memory. I like that. It's a much more productive metaphor than thinking about the absent actor or the absent viewer when you're working. And I'd have to think about how you would translate that into what could be productively beneficial for the actor in the moment of the work in which they're filming. Because I think if there was a theme to what bridged my first remarks into the workshop, I think is that if the actor is going to be a bridge between theater, where everybody is actively present, and cinema, where the actor is only a metaphor for whoever is of a memory, for whoever is actually present watching the film, the eventual viewer, then the actor in film has to understand that they're surrendering the choice of how their image is framed and viewed and edited later. So they're only partly in control of what memory they can create for the actor, because they create in the moment, we create in front of the camera what happens now. And then the editor will ultimately come in and choose what they worked out as the memory that the eventual viewer will actually see. And there's another thing about cinema that fascinates me. I don't know if this is to your point exactly, but it got raised in my mind as I listened to you, the other thing that I find so interesting about cinema, especially when we watch old films, is how they become so much more dated in terms of who's going to look at them than a performance in theater, which is ephemeral and goes. So it's always in the now. So for example, if you think about the method, the beginning of the method in the 30s, when all the people who were seen as so outrageously realistic that, as one viewer put it, watching a group theater performance was like watching an accident on stage happen in front of you, because it was that real and that in the now and that in the moment. But when we go back and we look at Garfield on film, or any of these people from the 30s, they look really phony to us today, because the idea of what is realistic changes. Realism is only in the eye of the beholder. What realism is a style of work and not a reality of work. And so the 1930s actors who in the know were authentic from their point of view no longer look authentic to us, because we have changed. The viewers have changed. So the memory changes. Just like memory is something that changes over time, and that, my brother and I have similar memories of what happened in our family, but we sometimes actually see them so differently in our heads that they were like, what? I don't remember that. Do you remember that? And film kind of works that way over time. So what we see as realistic today, if we film something in 2024, I would like to come back in 2080 and look at it and see if it looks as realistic to us then as it did today. It's a moving target. And that's what I find so fascinating about working with cinema, because we can only control what we can control and then leave the rest to time, if you will.
Thank you so much, Sharon. This is fantastic. This is a great comment, great observation, as always. One last question from Eric from Manila, Philippines. Thanks, Eric. It's in the chat. And the question is, I like the freedom to choose a verb or action that would resonate more with the actor. But out of all the possible choices, how do you guide your actor to choosing the strongest action or verb to serve the scene?
Okay, thank you. Great question. Thank you so much. And I think that the three actors and I met and worked on this in rehearsal, so we didn't want to take your time. But usually what we do is we actually sit together and read for the facts and then brainstorm. And I listen to their brainstorming. What verbs come to your mind that would support you as the action in this scene, or you as the counter action in the scene? And I ask them to free associate as much as they can. Sometimes actors will come up with things that aren't even verbs, or sometimes they'll come up with a good idea, but there's no object to it. So, it's like, well, yeah, that's a good idea. Try to do that. But to whom are you doing it? What is the point of it? So we have a discussion, and ultimately we make some decisions about what they should try based on that free associating. And I do, as Keith well knows, send people to thesauruses. Actually, Keith one day brought in a book he had found at a yard sale to one of our classes called 101 English Verbs. That was a book that I kept dragging into rehearsal every time and go, okay, look up that verb. What does it say? How are the nuances? How does it play? And ultimately, we come up with a few ideas for the actor to try. And then we look at which verb, just like I did with Joelle, which verb sets them into the best frame for having the most the most stimulus from that verb that sets their imagination working strongest. So it is a bit of a process, and I hope that helps you have some insight into how we were working on that. And if we were going to go and do this again, because this was in the moment, I might go back and ask them to try some different verbs.